Well, shalom, dear friends, and welcome to our ongoing Bible study in the book of Genesis. And today we'll be at chapter 48, so we're getting real close to the end. Um, the chapter we'll be studying today, chapter 48, is interesting in that it is about the subject of Jacob, now living in Egypt, approaching death and wanting to see his son Joseph and Joseph's sons and bless them. Now, in the next chapter, chapter 49, Jacob will be blessing all the other sons of Israel. But the fact that this chapter is dedicated to Joseph and his sons indicates that they were very special to Jacob. Not only was Joseph uh, Jacob's favorite son, and he was very public about that, with the awarding to him of the coat of many colors or the long sleeve coat, however we want to translate that. His brothers were very much aware of Jacob's favoritism toward one of their youngest brothers, Joseph, and it created a lot of animosity and hostility, and ultimately resulted in their selling his brothers selling Joseph into slavery in the land of Egypt. But all this was part of God's grand design, because God knew that the dream about the 7 years of plenty, followed by the 7 years of famine, were coming down the road, and he made preparations for the survival not only of the Egyptians, but the people in the surrounding area, including the land of Canaan, where the chosen family was living. And we've seen how that plays out in the last, what would it be? um, Close to 12 or 13 chapters in Genesis, I guess. So we've seen that play out. In this chapter, Jacob is going to bless Joseph through his sons, Jacob's grandsons, and then in the next chapter he'll bless the other tribes, the other sons of his. And this will result in inheritance of land in the promised land following the Exodus. It will result in the formation of tribes and regions in the promised land. And what we're going to see today is the special blessing and the special inheritance that Joseph's sons will receive. So, as we usually do, I will invite those of you who don't want to go through the background material. There's not too much special in the background material today. We will look at a map of the distribution of the land, the land of Israel, and the tribal allotments of that land. So if you're interested in kind of looking at the geography of the inheritance of the sons of Jacob, you might want to stick with us. If you would prefer just to do the verse by verse Bible study of this chapter, then you may want to fast forward at this point and then wait for us until you see the Bible software on the screen, and then we will continue on together. I think this is going to be a relatively short video. There aren't that many verses. There's not that much action happening in this chapter. But of course, we want to do every chapter, and it is significant, especially to the priority and preference of Jacob in dealing with his favored son Joseph, and then his grandsons through Joseph. So let's go ahead and start through our background material. This is the book I've been advertising. It is actually a systematic theology of the Nazarenes and Essenes. These are the two denominations or sects of Judaism which embraced Yeshua, Jesus, as the Messiah when he came and became his followers. They are the the forefathers of the Christian church. That's kind of the genealogy. It's kind of the historical background of this group. As a systematic theology, it goes from Genesis to Revelation, hitting what I think are the high points, theologically speaking. And although I do draw somewhat from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are associated with the Essenes, this is a biblical theology because I believe the Nazarenes and the Essenes were biblical, even though the Essenes produced and preserved for us the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the reason I'm advertising this book in this video series is because there is a whole lot of information in the book that comes from the book of Genesis, important interpretations from the book of Genesis that I think will be rewarding for you, not only your study of Genesis, but in your study of the whole Bible. So that's available to you if you would like to purchase a copy of it. The best source for getting my books is to just buy them through Amazon. This is the a dispensational chart that we have been using for quite a few chapters, quite a few videos. It is the patriarchal era of biblical history, technically called by the dispensationalists the age of promise, which could be a little bit misleading if you got the impression that this is the only period in biblical history where God made promises. He makes them throughout the whole Old and New Testaments. But the promises, as we'll see in later chapters of the Bible, are an essential part of God's plan for mankind and all of his creation. So this is where we learn about a lot of promises and covenants that God makes. As it's titled, The Age of the Patriarchs, we look at the first, what would it be? One, two, three, four generations of the promised people, the chosen people of Israel, the Jewish people, they would later be called. Many people find it interesting to know that the term Jew or Jewish does not appear in the Bible until I think the book of Esther is the first part of that. So that would be like the 500s BC. And all the time prior to that, they were just known as the Israelites or the Hebrews. So in this era, calling this people group the Hebrews was interesting because not only because of the Hebrew language that they spoke, but also the culture and the fact that God was dealing with them. Yivrit, Hebrew, means to like cross over from one place to another. And the book of Genesis is full of, travelings from one place to another, crossing over the Euphrates, crossing over the Jordan, ultimately crossing over the Red Sea. So, yeah, the first four generations are Avram, whose name was changed by God to Avraham, which means a father of many nations. And that theme of many nations or, multitudes of people is going to crop up in the lesson for today. And honestly, I'm not sure exactly what to do with that, what to make of that. Yitzhak is the second generation. His name was not changed. It remained Yitzhak all of his life. Yaakov is the patriarch of the third generation. His name is changed by God to Israel. And we have remarked in these videos, and I don't know how accurate it is, but it's something I was taught a long time ago, and it kind of seems to hold true. After God changes Jacob's name to Israel, when he's behaving as a conquering prince of God's chosen people, the Bible refers to him by the name Israel. When he's doing his kind of flawed human thing, then the Bible refers to him as Yaakov. We've kind of tried to trace that and see if that's true or not. So I don't know how persuaded you are that that's a legitimate paradigm. Then we have the fourth generation, which are the 12 sons of Yaakov, Israel, and there is another daughter. I'm sorry, there is at least one daughter that is mentioned in the Bible, but she's not listed here because these are the sons and the patriarchs. of the tribes. Reuben is the firstborn, then Shimon, then Levi, and then Yehuda. Jacob actually has four women in his life, two wives and two maidservants of those wives, which I think the scripture calls them concubines. But between the four of them, they produce these 12 sons. Judah is important because that will be the tribe from which come the kings of Israel. And after the Civil War in the Old Testament, then the tribes of Judah, as opposed to the northern kingdom of Israel and its kings. So it's the royal tribe. And it's also the tribe through which this red ribbon of salvation comes, which is an indication that the Messiah, Yeshua, came from this tribe. Yeshua was from the tribe of Yehuda, the royal tribe. Levi is the priestly tribe, the priests and the Levites, kind of the assistants or the apprentices, not really apprentices, the assistants to the priests, were active in the tabernacle and later the temple and so forth. So they were the leaders of the religious life of the people. And when we get to the map in a few minutes, we'll point out a few kind of interesting things. Then we have the rest of them. Yosef has been the main character since chapter 37 and continues to be. He's sold by his brothers into slavery in Egypt. And later, because God was with him and wanted to use him in a very useful way that would enable God to keep and preserve his covenants faithfully, Joseph plays a prominent role, not as the oldest son, not as the royal son, not as the religious leader's son, but in many ways, he's a type of the Messiah, a type or kind of a figurative expression of the Savior, of the Mashiach, the Messiah, Yeshua. Then you've got Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So those are the names of the 12 sons. Now, in our text for today, we are going to see that Jacob, the father of all these men, is going to give Yosef a double portion of land and I think significance also in the tribal inheritance in the promised land. In just a few minutes, we will look at a map that shows the tribal inheritances, the geographical inheritances of the regions that each tribe inherited. So we'll look at that in a few minutes, but you'll notice on that map that there is no land inheritance by Joseph himself, but his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, each inherit a tribal nomenclature. So Joseph actually gets two tribes, and those two tribes are named Manasseh and Ephraim. And the tribe of Manasseh is going to get two separate regions. So it will be a divided tribe. And you'll see that's a very large portion of land. So on this chart here on the right, we see Egypt prominently displayed here. And the significance of Egypt here is Joseph's residence there for like 30 years before he's reunited with his brothers. No, I take that back. 17 years? Anyway, the years that Joseph and later the other family members are in Egypt. And then the red ribbon continues past Egypt in the events of the Exodus, which starts in Exodus chapter 1. But I don't think I'm going to do a study on Exodus, at least right away. I may want to do that at some point in the future. But for now, I want to go to this map. And I know the labels on the territories here are kind of hard to read. So I wish I could blow this up, but it's just on my PowerPoint. But I think you can get the idea. If you look on this map, you'll notice that there is no tribe of Joseph, okay? But that doesn't mean that Joseph was denied a real estate inheritance in the promised land because he received that inheritance through his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So if we go to right here about the middle of the map, I'm circling the tribe of Ephraim in the purple here. So that's the tribal inheritance of Ephraim, who happened to be Joseph's younger son. Manasseh was the oldest, as we'll see in our text for today. Over here on the east side of the Jordan River, the brown area is labeled East Manasseh, and it is a very large portion of real estate. But if we go to the west and cross the Jordan, we'll see that this yellow area here is also a tribal area given to Manasseh, but this is West Manasseh, or Manasseh, I guess, in English. So if you look at these two tribes together, that is just one patriarchal inheritance, and it's a very large portion of real estate. And then if you add Ephraim to it, it's even bigger. So what would you say this territory represents? Maybe a fourth of the promised land, maybe even a third of the promised land. Now, Judah, on the other hand, is also very large. And in fact, the tribal inheritance of Shimon is kind of right smack in the middle of Yehuda. And later, the tribe of Shimon kind of becomes less and less significant and kind of is absorbed into Judah, but there'll always be a tribe of Shimon. So there is not a named tribe or an area of real estate for Yosef, but his grandsons, I'm sorry, his sons and Jacob's grandsons inherit a very large portion here. The other thing I want to point out is if you look on this map, there's no tribal region of Levi. The Levites, the church workers, the religious workers are going to live all over the land. They will be scattered throughout the land. And their duties will be to instruct and teach and mentor the Israelites and all the different tribes because the Levites will have the greatest access to the Holy Scriptures. They will be the best trained, and so therefore the ones that are best equipped to teach the others. So they will live all over throughout the different tribes as the religious leaders of the nation. Now, one specific tribe within Levi is the descendants of Aaron, who will be the brother of Moses, and they will be the priests. They will be the ones who will offer sacrifices in the tabernacle and later in the temple, all the way up to and for 40 years beyond the time of Yeshua into the New Testament era up until 70 AD. Now, at first in the Promised Land, the tabernacle was in a place called Shiloh. And I don't know if it's on this map or not. It's just a few miles north of Jerusalem, kind of a suburb of Jerusalem. So it was in Shiloh for quite some time. It didn't move to Jerusalem, which is right here where my pointer is. That became the capital of the country and the location of the tabernacle and the temple. When David conquered Jerusalem, it became the holy city, became God's chosen city. So the tabernacle was there for a while. David's son Solomon built the temple, and then there were several temples in the Promised Land until it was ultimately destroyed there in 70 AD and so forth. So that's a look at the the various patriarchs, the leading ancestors of each one of the tribes, and a look at the real estate they inherited in the Promised Land after the Exodus and the conquest of the land. And the interesting way, it seems like there are always 12 tribes, but there are actually like 13 or 14 different names that are reckoned as the sons of Yaakov. But some of them have property and some of them don't. Some of them have inheritance and some of them don't. Sometimes a name is left out, so another name is substituted. I think it may be either in Ezekiel or the book of Revelation, Dan is left out of some of the lists, but Joseph is is added in there. So God wants the tribes to always come out to the number 12. He seems to like that number. And although there are many more regions than 12 here, they are distributed according to God's pleasure among these sons. So, okay, that's the end of our preparatory material. Hopefully, that will make the verse by verse study make a little more sense to you. You can approach it in an informed manner. So here we are in Genesis 48, verse 1, from the New King James Version in the left screen. Now it came to pass after these things, and that would be the things of verse 48. I'm sorry, chapter 47. What was chapter 47 about? Well, it was the last years of the famine and how the people gave all their money, all of their homes and property, all of their livestock, everything they had, including themselves, to pay for food so they could survive the famine. So ultimately, they were possessionless and actually slaves. Maybe that's too harsh. Servants of the Pharaoh, and of course Joseph was kind of the prime minister, I guess. So after those things, it came to pass that Joseph was told, "Indeed, your father is sick." Chalah is the Hebrew word, which means like an infirmity. It can be old age, the things that go along with old age, poor eyesight, difficult mobility, and things like that. It's the typical word for for a disease, but it's not necessarily a disease. I think we would just probably say in this context, it's the effects of old age. And that is Joseph, took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And here they're listed in their birth order. Manasseh is the oldest, Ephraim is the youngest. And by the way, their names have significance. They were born to Joseph while he was in Egypt. He became married to, I can't remember his wife's name right offhand. She was the daughter of the priest of On in Egypt. So he married her, and she had two sons. One was named Manasseh, which means forgetfulness. And I think Joseph picked that name for him because now that he's married and he's in a good position, status in Egypt, he can kind of forget all the sadness in his life, the betrayal by his brothers, the time he spent in prison, the fact that he was accused of crimes he didn't commit, and so on and so forth. So his firstborn son is named Forgetfulness. Ephraim means fruitfulness. What would it be? Para or parar? The root word in Hebrew for fruitfulness, par, basically. And Joseph hopes to be part of that uh, Abrahamic promise of descendants of the chosen people that would ultimately result in their population, qualifying them to be considered a nation, as many of the stars of the sky and the grains of sand on the seashore and so forth. So he names his second son Ephraim, fruitfulness. And Yaakov was told, look, your son Yosef is coming to you. And Israel strengthened himself and sat up on the bed. So here's the name Yaakov, and here's the name Israel. So Yaakov is what? He's kind of sickly, and he sends word to his son Joseph. And then Joseph comes with his grandsons to see their father, and now he's called Israel. Now he's a man of faith. Now he somehow gained strength because of the appearance of his son and grandsons. So he strengthens himself and he sat up on the bed. So he's being more uh, prompted, guided by faith, more kind of heroic and strong and so forth. So he's called Israel. Verse 3, then Yaakov said to Yosef, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. Now, I think this is, I can't tell you exactly what chapter it is, but it is when Abraham's father had died, Terah had died in Haran, and that seemed to be the turning point for Abraham to begin to travel to the south into the promised land and live there, sojourn there, where God had instructed him to go. Now, the city of Luz is also known in in the Bible as Beth El. Beth El means the house of God, and I can't remember what Luz means. Uh, Luz is probably the Canaanite name for that city, but this is the place where Yaakov camped out and he was escaping from his brother Esau, and he camps out there at Luz, and he uses some stones for a pillow, which may have been the reason for the dream that he had. But in the dream, he saw angels ascending and descending on the stairway to heaven, and God made some promises to him. And so, Jacob makes a deal with God. He says, if you'll be with me all the days of my life and watch out for me and protect me and guide me and bless me, then you will be my God and I'll be your person and I'll do my best to conform my life to your will. And you can use me as a faithful child of yours. So that happened in Luz or Bethel in the land of Canaan, and God blessed him, he said, and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you and make of you a multitude of people and give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. And of course, Bethel or Luz is in the promised land. It's that land between the river of Egypt on the west and the great Euphrates on the east and north. So it's kind of right in the middle of the heartland there. And God is promising to multiply him, to give Jacob many children. And God keeps that promise, and he does have many children. And again, this is part of the Abrahamic covenant. Bethel was the first place that first significant place in the land of Canaan where Abraham camped, and he had an experience of God's presence there. And now his grandson Yaakov has the same kind of experience. And he's thinking back to that. He's telling Joseph about his experiences there in Bethel and this promise that God made to him. Um, Descendants after you as an everlasting possession. Now, this is a significant thing. Uh, the word for possession is ahuzat. It would be ahuzah, but since it's in the construct form, it's ahuzat, which means something that you're able to hold on to possess, to grasp a hold of and claim as your own. And then the word for everlasting is olam. Now, the word olam can mean eternity or everlasting or never ending. And the context of the Bible would allow us to interpret the word olam as everlasting, never ending. So the 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 inheritance of the chosen people of the land, the promised land, as we've just described it, is an eternal possession. They will always, throughout eternity, own that territory. But it's also important that we understand that the word olam is sometimes translated an age, A-G-E, or an era. So it can be limited. It can be a very long period of time or a very short period of time. The Jewish people speak about the olam, there's that word, the olam hazeh, this age that we live in. They also say the olam haba, the age which is to come, which they believe is the messianic age, the 1,000-year kingdom, and then on into eternity. So in that context, we know that the Olam Hazeh, this age, is limited in time. So far, it's been a very long age, but it has a beginning and it has an end, as does the age to come, which has a beginning. I mean, the day before it wasn't the age to come. Now it is the age to come, and it will go on throughout eternity. But the first portion of the Olam Haba is the millennial kingdom. So it lasts 1,000 years and then it ends. And then the eternal occupation of that land that goes on for eternity. So we just need to be careful in assuming that this word olam always means eternal, no beginning and no end, or having a beginning and just continuing on into the future forever. Sometimes it means that, sometimes it doesn't. And the Bible makes it clear that God intends for the chosen people to occupy the promised land throughout eternity. And of course, because of disobedience, they were kicked out of it in 70 AD. In recent years, starting in, I was going to say 1948, which is when the modern state of Israel was established. But even prior to that, in the like late 1800s, and then up to 1948, Jewish people were migrating back to the promised land as the prophecies of the Old Testament had predicted. And now there is really a thriving nation, but it's a nation at war. And one of the things that the war is about there is that the Jewish people, the modern state of Israel, is laying claim to that land as their eternal possession. So they have a divine right to it. They have other than divine rights to it as well, because when the Zionist movement began and Jewish people began to return to the promised land, make aliyah, they say in Hebrew, go up to the promised land. They purchased that land from the like whoever owned it, whether it was the Bedouin tribes that lived there, whether it was from the British government, or the Turks, the Ottoman Turks, who owned it before the British did. This land was purchased, and oftentimes the purchase price for the land that was bought by the Jews from whoever the owner happened to be came from an international Jewish fund, which was a collection of funds all throughout the Jewish settlements in all different parts of the world, and then sent to the what was it called? The Jewish Agency, I guess, to provide money for Jewish people who were willing to go to the Promised Land and resettle it and make it a Jewish homeland. The land was purchased, so it was never stolen. Now, on several occasions since the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, and even in fact, the day after Israel was established as a nation, they were attacked by, I believe it was five neighboring Muslim nations, hoping to kill all the Jews. But Israel won that war against the most dramatic odds. Uh, and again, in 1967, the Six-Day War was fought. Again, many Muslim nations attacked Israel. Israel won the war. And in doing so, they gained property. The land at one time was divided during the time of the establishment of Israel. There is what is called the West Bank. The Palestinians call it the West Bank. The Jews, the Israelites, call it Judea and Samaria, part of the ancient homeland. There is the Gaza Strip, where a war is currently raging, and then there is the Golan Heights, which were kind of controversial areas. But in their wars, 48, 1967, 1973, 1982, 2001 was an uprising. The Jewish people have gained territory. So they believe that the West Bank is their own by military conquest. The Palestinians who live there dispute that. But the reason I'm going through all this history stuff is to talk about this everlasting possession and the what the I guess the secular legal kind of human claim that the Jewish people have to any land where they're living. They're within the borders of the Promised Land. They have a legitimate legal claim to it. But they also, because of God's promises in the Bible, have a divine right to it. And the Bible promises them that God will preserve them in the fight to maintain the land that He has given them. And so they are very much aware of their divine right to the land also. But that's the big dispute. That's the big dispute. The Palestinians claim that the Jews stole their land from them and are oppressing them and so forth. Um, in my opinion, there's absolutely no truth to that. And of course, the rise of terrorism in groups like Hamas and Hezbollah in the north have made it almost impossible for Israel to live at peace with her neighbors. So there is a war now. Gaza has been fighting since last October. It would be October of 2023 in Gaza. In all likelihood, the war in Gaza, which is almost over now, will move to the north and probably attempt to silence Hezbollah up in Lebanon. So yeah, here's the one of the places where the land is promised to the descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov as an everlasting possession, or at least a possession for a very long age. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the land and the controversy over it. Verse 5, and now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, Jacob saying, before I came to you, Joseph, in Egypt, are mine. So these are Joseph's sons, and his dad, Yaakov, is claiming them for his own. So he is going to give each one of them, Ephraim and Manasseh, he's going to give them an inheritance like money and like the estate, but he's also going to give those two land in Israel. So, so Yosef will not be one tribe receiving one portion of inheritance, but he is going to be two tribes, each tribe named after his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and they will inherit a double portion of the inheritance. Yaakov says, they're mine. Ephraim and Manasseh are mine, as Reuben and Shimon shall be mine. So he's going to count those two as having an equal right to anything in the inheritance, land or wealth or livestock or whatever it is. They're going to be his. Your offspring, this is Jacob talking to Joseph, your offspring, Joseph's offspring, whom you beget after them shall be yours. So he's saying to his son Joseph, I'm laying claim to your sons Ephraim and Manasseh. Any more sons that you have, you can count as yours, but they will be called by the name of their brothers in the inheritance. So any additional sons that Joseph had would be considered by Yaakov to be Joseph's sons, but they will be living in the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, Dake has some kind of a good summary here of this. Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob claimed them as part of the great nation that God had promised him. They became the heads of two of the 12 tribes of Israel. One took the place of Joseph, the other the place of Levi. And on the map, when we looked at it in the preliminary material, we saw that there is no tribe of Joseph in the promised land, and there's no tribe of Levi, because Levi was scattered all over the country. And Joseph's name was replaced by the two names of his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. No complaint by Joseph because he's getting actually not two parcels of land, but three parcels of land because Manasseh was divided one portion of the tribe on the east of the Jordan River, the other on the west. So Joseph, one took the place of Joseph, the other the place of Levi, whose tribe became the priestly line and was not reckoned as one of the 12 tribes during the organization of the nation. Now, that's true insofar as the land is concerned, but there is a tribe called Levi, and the priests and the Levites come from that tribe, and that tribe is called Levi. There is no tribe called Joseph, with the rare exception of whether it's in Ezekiel or Revelation, I can't remember, where a tribe of Joseph is mentioned, but only because one of the other tribes, Dan, is left out of the counting for reasons that we'll go into when we get to those passages. So throughout the Old Testament, I don't think there will be much, if any, mention of a tribe of Joseph. It's Ephraim and Manasseh, but there is a tribe of Levi, just no land inheritance. In 8 of these lists of tribes, Levi is not mentioned because of having no inheritance in Israel with the 12 tribes. That's inheritance of land, not other resources. In 7 other lists of the tribes, of course, they're all located here, and as I'm passing the cursor over them, they're popping up in the information window. Levi is mentioned in these verses, and other places the tribes are not mentioned. The 24 lists vary to suit the purpose of each writer, whether making a record according to birth, blessing, encampment, numeration, or division. So that's a good summary of this. Let's see. We left off with verse 7. But as for me, when I came from Padan, that's Padan Aram, that's where Haran was, the ancestral home of Abraham, and that's where the extended family lived. When I came from there, from Syria, from Padan Aram, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way. Now remember, Yosef was born while Jacob and Rachel were living in Aram, in Padan Aram. But then when they had come to the land of Canaan, she conceived and then gave birth while they were living in Canaan, and that was the birth of Benjamin. There was but a little distance to go to Ephrat, which is, it is a Hebrew word and it means fruitful. I think that Ephrat is actually a region rather than a city, let's see, how should I say? Yeah, I'm going to stick with region. And I buried her there. That would be after the birth of Benjamin. On the way to Ephrat, that is Bethlehem. So Bethlehem is the chief city of Ephrat, and sometimes it's just considered two names for the same thing. But I think Bethlehem is in Ephrata. In the famous Micah prediction of where the Messiah would be born, thou Bethlehem Ephrata, kind of Bethlehem of Ephrata, of Ephrat. Okay, so then Israel saw Joseph's sons, and he said, who are these? And it's sort of like he knew who they were, but it's like he was having trouble recognizing them. And we will see in a few minutes that he was having eye problems, probably because of his age, maybe cataracts or something like that. Yosef said to his father, these are my sons whom God has given me in this place. Both of them were born in Egypt. And he said, please bring them to me. So this is Jacob asking Joseph to bring his sons, to me, to Yaakov, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age. So that's exactly what I said. Like I said, I don't know if that's cataracts or God just caused his eyesight to be dim, or whatever, so that he could not see. In other words, he could not distinguish, which son was which is going to be significant in the next few minutes here. Then Yosef brought them near, and he kissed and embraced them. So I think Joseph had one son on each side, and he kind of ushered them to his father, their grandfather. And then the grandfather, Yaakov, kissed them and embraced them like grandparents do to their grandkids. And it just freaks out the grandkids, unless the girls kind of like it, the boys are a little put off by it. Verse 11, and Israel said to Yosef, I had not thought to see your face. Now, why would he say that? First of all, because he thought he was dead for many years. But then, he found out that Joseph was still alive. That was plenty of incentive to get the elderly Yaakov to make the trip from the land of Canaan to the land of Egypt, where he could see his son and could live with him in the remaining years of his life. But in fact, God has also shown me your offspring. So now I've seen your face, Joseph. I've seen the face as well as I can of your sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, but God has shown me your offspring. So this is a prophetic statement that he's making. God has shown Yaakov something about his grandsons that's a little out of the ordinary. So Yosef brought them from beside his knees. I think that's the knees of Joseph. Like one son is on one side, the other is on the other side. They're probably seated or kind of kneeling down before the grandfather. And he bowed down, and I take this to be Joseph bowed down with his face to the earth. And this is just to honor his father and the one who is about to bless his own sons. And Yosef took them both, Ephraim on his Joseph's right hand. And since they are facing Jacob, it would be Israel or Jacob's left hand. You get the picture there? And Manasseh with his left hand, Yosef's left hand, but Israel's right hand, because they're facing each other, and brought them near him. Now, the reason Yosef is doing this is because his dad, Yaakov, is having trouble distinguishing which son is which. And Yosef wants to make sure that the oldest of his two sons, Manasseh, gets the blessing of the firstborn or of the eldest son in his family. So he puts that son, Manasseh, directly in front of Israel, Jacob, his father's right hand, because the right hand is the hand of blessing. And he expects his dad to reach straight out in front of him and place his right hand on Manasseh's head first and give him the blessing of the firstborn, and then with the left hand or cross over his right hand to Ephraim and give him the blessing of the second son. So Joseph took them both, Ephraim his right hand, and brought them near him. Verse 14, then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on whose head? Ephraim's head. So Jacob is crossing his arms over to give the blessing of the firstborn to the one he wants to, not Joseph wants to have it, but Jacob wants to have it because he believes that's God's will. So he laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. So he crossed his hands over. The right hand goes on Ephraim, the left hand goes on Manasseh. He does it on purpose, even though Manasseh is the firstborn. And he blessed Yosef and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has fed me all my life long to this day, the Malach, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. Now, this is an interesting reference because he's been talking about God and he continues to talk about God here, but refers to him as the angel. Well, there's this personage who shows up periodically in the Old Testament called the Malach Adonai or the Malach Yahweh. That's the angel of the Lord. It seemed to be a special angel who not only speaks for God, but speaks as God and is recognized as such. So there are quite a few references in the Old Testament, like to the angel who gave the law to Moses. That was God appearing in the burning bush. We might say the angel of the Lord appeared to him and gave him the law. So the angel of the Lord is frequently God himself. And this is the angel, a singular, special angel, Ha Malach, who has redeemed me from evil. Well, God is the only one who can redeem anyone from evil. So this angel must be God. And may that God bless the lads. Let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers Avram and Yitzhak. So the patriarchs will be kind of the name inheritance of each one of the sons, but here most significantly Manasseh and Ephraim. I should say Ephraim and Manasseh because they're getting the blessing that way. And let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Now, we did look, when we looked at the map, we looked at the tribal territories of Manasseh and Ephraim, and Manasseh is by far the largest piece of real estate there. Ephraim is fairly small. But when the various tribes entered the promised land, the population, the head count of the tribe of Manasseh was 32,000 people. But the tribe of Ephraim, the smaller real estate tribe, was 45,000. So what? 13,000 more. So here, part of the prophecy is that they would grow to very large populations. And in fact, Ephraim is going to be more populous than Manasseh. Now, when Yosef saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. It displeased Yosef because he assumed that the oldest son would receive the blessing of the firstborn. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to switch it over to Manasseh's head. And Yosef said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. I think that would be right." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son. I know." It's like Kimi Räikkönen in Formula One racing. His team is talking to him on the radio, trying to give him good advice. And he says, "Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing." So Yaakov is saying, "Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. God has spoken to me and I'm following his will." He, that is Manasseh, Yosef's favorite one, shall also become a people, and he shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he. And his descendants, Ephraim's descendants, shall become a multitude of nations. So I just shared with you that the population upon the entry into the promised land of Ephraim was larger than that of Manasseh. So at least that satisfies this statement to a degree. But the fact that the descendants of Ephraim would become a multitude of nations, I can't explain that. I don't know what that means. And I checked with Dake, the study Bible notes, no help there. So if anybody has any idea, like what nations is this talking about, jot it down in the comments down below, and maybe you can enlighten me as to what that is all about. My kind of knee-jerk reaction to that is that maybe it's talking about some Gentile. nations that emerged from Ephraim after the dispersion. I guess that's a possibility, but I certainly couldn't prove it. So I'm not sure what to make of that. Verse 20, so he, Yaakov, blessed them that day by saying, by Israel, uh, by you, I'm sorry, let me start over here. Here's what, here's what Yaakov said. By you, Israel, like the nation, will bless. By you, Israel will bless, saying, may God, okay, here's what this means. I had trouble reading it when I was preparing this, and I'm having trouble now. So let me start over here. So he, Yaakov, blessed them, saying, let me paraphrase. Here is the way that the future nation of Israel will bless others by saying, may God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh, like as fruitful as the two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. So let me try to read it here in English. So he, Yaakov, blessed them saying, that day, saying, by you Israel will bless other people, saying, may God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh. And thus he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am dying, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your father. So this is a promise that not only Joseph, but also his sons and the other sons in the family and their, not only their families, but what will be their tribes, will eventually leave Egypt and go back to the land of Canaan. There's still quite a bit of time that is left of the Hebrews, the Israelites, living in Egypt. They'll be there for about 215 years, 4 generations. This is the first generation that lived in Egypt, so there'll be 3 more. But then when that time is finished, God will orchestrate the Exodus, and then all the Israelites will leave Egypt and go to the Promised Land and eventually inherit it. And that's what Yaakov is promising Yosef for himself personally and for the rest of the family. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers. So what that means, he's saying, I, Jacob, have given you, Joseph, an additional portion above what your brothers will receive. So when the blessing comes and the inheritance comes, each of the 12 tribes will receive one portion. I'll call it 1/13 of the blessing, because there's a double portion that's going to be given to one of those tribes, and that tribe is the tribe of Joseph. But there is no tribe called Joseph. It's called by the name of his 2 sons. So one son, Ephraim, the other son, Manasseh, receives 1/13, but that's double what all the other tribes have received. So I've given to you one portion above, 2 instead of 1, your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. Now, this is an interesting statement for Jacob to make, because he hasn't conquered any land with the sword, but I think he is speaking prophetically, maybe even speaking as of God, and God saying, I'm going to conquer the land of the Amorites with the sword by means of war and give it to this family. And when that happens, the tribe of Joseph, which will be Ephraim and Manasseh, will receive the double portion. And this again is a promise of an eventual departure or exodus from Egypt and a return to the promised land, now called the land of Canaan, then called the land of Canaan. And there are still Israelites and Jews in that land to this day. So that brings us to the end of Genesis, chapter 48. It's a fairly short video, only about an hour long. So since this is a chapter of blessing, and the blessings were given I'm sure in the Hebrew language, I will give you the Hebrew language version of the priestly benediction. Yivarechecha Yahweh vayishmarecha, Ya'er Yahweh panav elecha vayuchanecha, Isa Yahweh panav elecha vayasem lecha shalom. In English, that is, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. So that brings us to the end of our Bible study. I hope we will see you next time. Shalom, shalom, my dear friends.